You are listening to Claret and Blue, an Aston Villa podcast brought to you by Birmingham Live. Hello, welcome to Claret and Blue. My name is Matt Davies, filling in for Dan Rawlinson today on a well-earned day off. And I'm here to discuss the appointment of Neil Critchley as Aston Villa's number 2. To get some insight on that, we're joined by LancashireLive's Blackpool FC writer, Sean McGinley. Sean, thanks for joining us on what was a day off. How's it going?
Yeah, it's not too bad. I'm in the middle of moving houses at the moment, so it was ideal timing from Neil Critchley, so I thank him very much for that.
Yes. A few people with Blackpool thanking Neil in a similar manner, I guess. What's your initial take on his moves to Villa and how it's gone down at your end?
Shock, I think, is the word. I think everyone was kind of prepared for an offer from somewhere for him in the near future, but to be honest, I think he was probably good enough to get a lower Premier League job on his own terms anyway, rather than a number 2 job. So I think there's an element of surprise that he's taken an assistant role. Obviously, I'm sure, as we'll come on to, the assistant role at Villa is probably slightly different to other places in terms of the influence that they have. But yeah, just generally surprised. I think a lot of fans aren't happy, and I think hopefully over time that will turn into sort of a memory of how good he was for Blackpool and how much he did for the club. But at the moment, I think it's all a bit raw and they feel almost a bit let down, really, because he'd been talking about a longer-term vision, a longer-term plan with the club headed into next season, and now that's very quickly gone on the back burner.
Yeah, you mentioned there the work he'd done at Blackpool. I mean, he's not a household name, especially if you're a Premier League fan like Villa fans are. I mean, tell us a bit about the job he did do at Blackpool while he was there.
Yeah, well, he didn't get off to the greatest of starts in League One. So he was sort of 1 win in about 10, I think it was, at the start. And he was sort of sticking to his principles. And then there kind of came a moment where sometimes I feel like there's a perception of young managers that they will just have a set style of play and just stick to it regardless. And he kind of adapted, and that adaptability has really seen him through. And that's been the difference maker for us. He went on an amazing run in League One. The defence was solid and sound and could barely concede a goal. You had Dan Ballard on loan from Arsenal, who was a big part of that in League One. And generally, in terms of, I think his main trait was his off-the-ball work and his ability to sort of see a game in a clearer picture than anyone else in the League One. In League One in particular, I think tactically he's probably up there with some of the best, I think, personally. I think that it's probably natural that later in his career he'll take that step again into the number 1 role. But obviously we got that promotion from League One, which wasn't really expected off the back of the Grayson season. It was a pretty generic mid-table finish. So to get that promotion, we almost got promoted a year early, I think, in terms of the club's plans anyway. And then he's come up into the Championship and he's done well with the resources that he's got at his disposal. We never ever looked over our shoulders in terms of relegation. And there was a spell just before the international break in 2022 where we thought maybe perhaps we could make a late push for the playoffs, but tailed off a little bit towards the end. But overall, it's an amazing achievement to finish 16th in the Championship in the first season back with what is one of the lowest budgets in the league.
I guess it's a regular thing with Villa now that we say here. There's the Gerrard pull. Obviously, there's a connection there with Gerrard, isn't there, from Liverpool? They've known each other for quite a while, haven't they?
Yeah, so I think Critchley kind of took over from Michael Beale when he left for Sao Paulo for a time. And yeah, Gerrard kind of worked under both of them for a spell and sort of learnt the trade there. And I think obviously I've sort of read quite a bit about Michael Beale and his as a tactician in particular. He's quite an important part of that. And it's the sort of similar thing with Neil Critchley now. So it really wouldn't be surprising if sort of, again, like Michael Beale's built up a reputation now in the wider fan base. I think perhaps Neil Critchley will do the exact same in the Premier League because they're cut from the same cloth, really. And I think that's probably important in terms of Gerrard having that sustainability at Villa.
One of the things that's kind of a hallmark of Gerrard football is you push the fullbacks on, everything goes through the fullbacks. So he plays one striker and he's played 2 10s or 2 strikers and 1 10 at the end of last season. I mean, what kind of football were Blackpool playing? Is it a similar vein to that?
Well, I think, again, I'll touch on that adaptability, is that he kind of prepared for different opponents and tweaked things based off of them. I think that's where a lot of the success came. But if you're talking generally over a season, he played a 4-4-2, and again, it was all about the wing backs, like you say, trying to get balls into the box, 2 strikers up top, bit more direct than perhaps we initially expected him to be when he came in the door. But that, again, I think that's that pragmatism that he has, that he can kind of see when is best to play out from the back and when's not to. I think a prime example of that is that we played Russell Martin's Swansea at home, and obviously they're very possession-based, and we simply just sat off for the entire game, got an early goal and sat off them and let them have the ball. And then 3 days later, we played Sheffield United and we were pressing from the front really aggressive. So he understands little tweaks to make on opposition, different opponents. And I think that perhaps will factor into being a number 2 as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Forest fan, so I watched a lot of Championship football last season. Not this season coming, thankfully, but I was massively impressed with Blackpool. I thought he did a great job. What was he like to deal with? And is he a good bloke? What kind of sense do you get of his man management with players?
Yeah, he's one of the most genuinely nice people you'll probably ever meet. He's very open and honest. He'll always back his own opinions, and I think that stands for a lot, really, in that he's very measured and understands what he wants, and he's very confident in what he wants. And I think you only have to see the reaction from the likes of Gary Medine on social media. They absolutely adored him, and they always used to say in press conferences that it doesn't matter what Neil Critchley tells them, they know he's right, so they're going to follow it anyway. There used to be this thing where they weren't quite sure at first, and then when he started to tweak things, or when he'd rotate the side quite often. So, for example, I think Jake Beasley scored a double and then was dropped the next game. And he would always pick the team based on the next opponent and wouldn't care about the past match in terms of form and things like that quite often. So it was all about trust in the squad. And I think you can tell by the fact that, again, Jake Beasley wasn't actually in the side for 4 months. When he joined in January, he was sort of in the background, and fans were sort of asking questions of where he was, when he would play. And then he turned up and scored against Birmingham in the 6-1 win, which I'm sure I'll share on here because I'm sure they'll like that. But that just kind of shows that there's this inherent trust in him, inherent belief in what he does. And I've not seen that in a manager in a long time at Blackpool. I grew up a Blackpool fan, and I probably have him down as the best manager in terms of his ability in the ceiling that you can get to. And that obviously includes Ian Holloway and the like. So really disappointing to see him go, but he's such a good man manager, but he's also such a good tactician as well.
I suppose some Villa fans might think, well, he's only ever managed in the lower leagues, but with his Liverpool background and now that experience of being a number 1, does it feel like Villa are getting kind of a well-rounded coach who's ready for this to work in the Premier League now?
Yeah, because I think you could see him grow as the job was going on. He looked more confident. He was quite shy, I think, at first with the press, and just generally looked a bit almost unsure, because obviously he's new to the role. It's natural that that's going to happen. And then very quickly, as results started to go his way, he became much more confident. He leaves a very assured man in what he wants and what he wants to achieve. And I think part of the reason of him leaving is that he doesn't like to sit still. He always wants to progress. And I think he probably sees this as the next natural progression step, and that he can have that progression with Villa. So, yeah, he's to me, he should be a Premier League manager for me, because that's how highly I see him. So it's kind of difficult to talk about him in the fact that he's a number 2 at Premier League side, because I do genuinely think the first Premier League job that will come up next season, and Neil Critchley should have been in that post. But we move on, I guess.
Do you think one fringe benefit for Blackpool that fans might hope for now is that actually Critchley uses this connection and it benefits Villa, and they might send some of their younger players to Blackpool? They've got quite a lot of players who ended up last season in the Championship. Do you think Blackpool might be a destination now for some of those players to go and get regular football at that level? Yeah,
we'd hope so. It'd be nice if we could get Cameron Archer. I'm sure the other side of Lancashire would love that one. But it's quite interesting actually on that point, because Critchley never really used his Liverpool connection, because he liked to develop the players that are in-house and his own players, and sort of there's an extent to which I feel like there's an over-reliance sometimes on loanees in the Championship to get you to where you need to be, and he didn't really sort of buy into that. So it'd be interesting to see if the new manager perhaps is more inclined to do that. But yeah, I mean, you can see the youth talents that Villa have. It'd be a great boost for us to have someone that, even if it's just a striker or a defender or midfielder, anyone on the pitch, just to have that extra little bit of quality, where perhaps when there's been tight margins last season where we didn't quite get the rub of the green, then that extra bit of quality would help.
And you mentioned about player development there. Is that something you think he's going to bring to Villa? Because they have got so many young players like Jacob Ramsey and people like that. He works well with young players then, does he?
Yeah, and old players as well. And I think that's an important point to make, is that Richie Keogh came into the club and I think everyone was asking, why has this happened? Because you didn't expect him to be a Championship footballer probably ever again after leaving Huddersfield. And he came in, he looked a bit shaky at first. And he's really improved as a player under Neil Critchley. And he said himself he's learned things about his game at 35 that he hadn't learned in the 20 years before. And I think that's an important point to make as well, because everyone seems to have improved under him. I made the point yesterday that if you have a mid-table squad, Neil Critchley will get you promotion. If you've got a relegation squad, Neil Critchley will get you mid-table, because he gets these little fine margins out of players that perhaps shouldn't have them. And I think it will kind of show now that he's left that certain players that perhaps have been overperforming at times might start to regress a bit because Neil Critchley's not there. So that's a massive factor for him. And I think that's the most important thing for him. He always referenced how important player development was for him in the role. So, yeah, I think that's the key, really.
Any worry at your end that any players are that good that he might take out? I'm thinking of Josh Bowler here. Is there anyone, or are they really not quite that ready to make a move to a club like Villa?
I think that the one that can make a step to the Premier League is Marvin Ekpiteta, the centre-half. He's come up from the lower leagues, non-league, and sort of worked his way up. Quite a great story, really. He's had practically a promotion every year over the past 5 years and worked his way up the ladder. And he walks the Championship at this point. He's an impressive, intelligent footballer, and he's ready-made for the Premier League for me. But obviously, whether Villa have centre-half gaps to fill, I don't know, but he would be the one for me that I think would step up. I think Josh Bowler probably needs another season in the Championship. I don't think he's as consistent as he probably should be if he's then going to go and get a Premier League move, but I think perhaps he might get a Premier League move anyway with Forest and Bournemouth looking into him. Yeah,
Forest were massively keen in January, weren't they?
Yeah.
Just lastly then, I mean, it's not the biggest concern for Villa fans, but what next for Blackpool? Are you a bit fearful now that they might get this choice wrong? It's a big moment for your club, isn't it?
Yeah, I am a bit worried because, again, it's that point of Critchley was getting levels out of a squad that probably realistically shouldn't be getting those levels. And he was already kind of pointing towards the fact that this summer will be big in terms of recruitment. The budget isn't great this summer because they're having to put internal infrastructure investments into the training ground and the new East Stand, because obviously under previous ownership, Blackpool's just been abandoned. So they're about 20 years behind everyone else as a normal football club. So you have to try and entice a manager to come into that setup, kind of knowing that it will be a massive risk and perhaps you might be fearful of relegation. But I think the club are well set in terms of the staff behind the scenes to identify the right type of manager. I think it's important that they don't rip up the copybook, if that makes sense, in terms of this has worked with Neil Critchley, so why not try again down a similar vein? So hopefully we'll see some. I imagine it'll probably be a left field appointment in all honesty.
Excellent. Right. Well, we wish Blackpool well, and we'll leave it there. Be back early next week with Dan and the regular contributors for a full-length podcast. But hopefully that was interesting for everyone watching along. We do appreciate you joining us. Sean, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, no worries.
And wish you well for the summer. I hope it goes well for Blackpool, and we'll see everyone soon.
Thank you for listening to Claret and Blue, an Aston Villa podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode, but until then, up the Villa.